Okay.
This is one. No flickering lights. Here we go. So I'm going to talk about diabetes and obesity. It's a global health problem, as you all know. It's an ever increasing non-communicable disease. The causality is very complex. Genes might be involved, but really the availability of an energy-dense food and decrease in physical activity are the most important contributors, as you all know. And dietary fat intake as being most responsible is now very hotly debated. So there's no more low-fat diets, and I'll talk about that in detail. The challenges we face with obesity and weight, it's the net effect of it on morbidity and mortality is very difficult to quantify, and our genes has changed, but not to the extent that could be the only reason for the emerging weight problem. And few types of obesity are treatable and curable, and the majority require long-term treatment. So, and there is also the entity of the healthy obese. There are many healthy obese individuals have no metabolic problems and their weight is in the obese range. So how are we going to deal with these people? So what is obesity? We redefine it as physicians with body mass index. It's a calculation we make by putting the weight in kilograms on the meter square of the height, and we came up with this, that the BMI above 25, they labeled it as overweight, and above 30 obese, and there is beyond that, there is class 1, class 2, and class 3. It's also defined by the presence of excess body fat. The pediatric population it's looked at differently, and underweight is where there is a BMI of below the 5th percentile for age and sex. Is always defined by age and sex. The normal is between the 5th and the 85th centile for age and sex, and overweight, which sorry about the spelling, BMI between the 85th and the 95th percentile for age and sex. Obesity is defined in the pediatric population by a BMI above the 95th percentile for age and sex. This is taken from the public health publication. Prevalence of overweight and obese individuals in the United States, around 65% of American adults are either overweight or obese. And that means nearly 130 million Americans are either obese or overweight. In pediatrics also, it's more common in Native American ethnic groups other than Caucasian, non-Hispanic blacks, and Mexican American, and having an obese parent increases the risk of obesity by 2 to 3-fold. And usually this obesity might persist from childhood into adulthood, depending on the age of onset. The earlier the age, the more likely those will develop into an obese adult. And of course, as I mentioned, parents being obese and how severe that weight problem is. So what about the prevalence? I told you that there is around 60% either obese or overweight. The prevalence among also school-aged children and adolescents in the United States has increased between 1980 and 2004 from 6.5% to 19%. And 34% of both children and adolescents were overweight or obese. And it tripled in the preschool age. Around 26% of preschool children were either obese or overweight. It is a global epidemic. It's a major health problem. And it's more, which I mentioned that. And as you see, by decade, the weight, as the age, the weight, and actually women fare much worse than men because of most likely the muscle mass. And of course, we all know there is disparities by racial and ethnic groups in overweight, and of course, African American have the highest, as well as the Hispanic. Okay, here we go. And the Hispanic compared to Caucasian white. And this is just to show you some trends in the obesity among the U.S. adults. It's how it's spreading over years, 94, 97, 2000, and really, if we go back, most of the states now, above 25% of their population are either obese or overweight. We all know this obesity will have a lot of risks associated with it, and these risks, to mention few, ranges between type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, gallbladder disease, cancer. It's very big, hot, debated topic, and osteoarthritis, strokes, asthma, sleep apnea, and other complications for the pregnant woman. There is a mortality associated with the obesity, and poor diet and physical activity most of the time are the major culprit in this situation, and actually they are regarded as the second leading cause of preventable death following tobacco use. So see how it's very, very important. An obese individual have a 50 to 100% increased risk of death from all causes compared to a normal weight individual. This is just to show you how the grave or the big picture. Diabetes, of course, increase in prevalence with the BMI. So as you see, 67% have a BMI of 27, 46% of 30, and 90 to 90%, they're all type 2 diabetics. So it's all common in, type 2 diabetes is more common in the obese population, as well as hypertension, cancer, and raised blood cholesterol. In children and adolescents, it's almost the same. They have their own little extra problems from impaired glucose tolerance, diabetes. They have hyperandrogenemia. Also, there is increase in linear growth. They have a puberty issues, as well as hypertension and cholesterol. And it's all because of fast food. And of course, increase the aging in population, growth of ethnic population with high prevalence, as well as decreased physical activity. I'm sure everybody says supersize it or supersize me. And just to show you a few patterns of food consumptions over the years in the United States. In the US, more is spent on fast food than on movies, books, magazines, newspapers, and record music combined. Every month, 90% of children 3 to 9 years of age visit a fast food restaurant. On any given day, 25% of adults visit a fast food restaurant. And per capita consumption of carbonated soft drinks, as you see, we are one of the leading countries in the world who uses soft drinks compared to UK, Mexico, China, and India. And as you see, the beverages, the intake among adolescents aged 11 to 18 we switched soft drinks for milk. Milk became way much, so milk went down, and the boys and girls, and soft drinks increased, and boys are leading the way. Snack chips, also the same. US is the leading country in using snack chips. And of course, if you put this in terms of BMI, you'll notice that the higher the BMI, the higher the risk of diabetes. So really, obesity and diabetes are all hand in hand together. And the higher, when you are in the 35 BMI, you have your higher risk, almost 100% sure that you will have diabetes. And these maps are for the prevalence of diabetes. Between 93 and 94, we had few of the states having more than 6%. Now, almost every state in the United States, the prevalence of diabetes is beyond 6%. So what's healthy eating? You had a talk about diabetes and actually food. If I heard her correctly, she was talking about the healthy eating. So over the past few decades, there are a few things I'm going to mention about carbohydrate and fat and diet, and there's a lot of controversies, there's a lot of debates. I'm just going to make it simple so that we know exactly really what is healthy, so that we go and pick it up. There is always talk about low-fat diet, Atkins diet, low-carb diet, Ornish diet, all kinds of diets. So which one really we're going to pick? So there is, over the past few decades, conflicting principles of healthy eating have been proposed, generating diverse opinions and what constitute healthy food choices. So I'm going to talk about dietary fat and carb and, just like some research on those and to show you so that finally we choose the right thing. So the chief concern about dietary fat in the past is their role in promoting coronary artery disease and, of course, the genesis of obesity and cancer. But despite decades of research, however, the relationship between fat intake and these outcomes is not entirely clear. It's not true that we know fat diet is the way to go. That is not true. And while recommendations for several authorities in the United States or organizations over the past 2 decades have emphasized decreasing the total amount of fat in the diet, most research indicates that type of fat is much more important than the total fat itself. So issues we have in regard to those, or with regard to these recommendations with a low-fat diet, and the evidence is weak that the high intake of fat per se is harmful in terms of heart disease and cancer, and even the role of fat in inducing obesity is really unclear. We eat more carb after the era of low-fat diet. People ate so much carb, they all gained weight. So it's really not clear that the low-fat diet is going to cause decreased weight. And population with higher total fat intake do not always have a higher incidence of heart disease. And studies of individuals within a population have not produced a compelling evidence that total fat intake is related to the incidence of heart problems. Even in cancer research, the relationship between fat intake and the development of cancer is even less documented than the heart problems. An association between fat intake and colon cancer may be explained by red meat rather than the actual amount of food, fat intake in the food. And the bulk is all epidemiological evidence support the role of dietary fat in the pathogenesis of prostate cancer, although the data are inconclusive. Mainly my point here is that really these studies were epidemiological. It's like surveys, not like prospective. They didn't follow them for a long time. And the association may be stronger with animal than with vegetable fat. And most importantly, in the Women Health Initiative trial that found that intervention to reduce total fat intake had no meaningful effect on the risk of colorectal cancer. And evidence are mounting that the type of fat may be considerably more important than the total fat intake. So that's the message, is not the amount of fat, is what kind of fat you eat. You stay away from saturated fat. You really should consume monosaturated fat and polysaturated fat. And the percentage has been moved. Many big, like American Diabetes Association and other associations have been moving from just, they said less, you have to consume less than 30% of your dietary intake of fat or dietary intakes is from fat. Now actually they're moving up to 35 and 40, provided all of that is monosaturated and polyunsaturated. Strokes also, there's been a lot of studies about strokes, but even those data regarding the dietary fat intakes and strokes are also they're spare. They tried to find an association or connection, they couldn't. Found no association between strokes and intake of saturated fat, even monosaturated or polyunsaturated, or even dietary cholesterol. Because of these conflicting findings, no firm recommendation are yet warranted regarding the effect of fat intake on stroke per se. Cholesterol is another issue. We also, I think I grew up, everybody talks about don't eat eggs and don't eat cholesterol and everything has cholesterol. It's also another myth. Dietary cholesterol raises the total serum cholesterol is true, but it's less important contributor to the overall picture of cholesterol than dietary fat, than the saturated fat. And consumption up to 1 egg per day, which contains 213 milligram of cholesterol, does not appear to substantially influence the risk of heart disease or stroke, neither among